Welcome to this week's Summer Career Festival 2021, where we will be helping you find your future. My name's Cheyenne and I'll be your host for today's session. So, all summer, we're talking to young people and other professionals about finding your purpose and discovering opportunities. Today's discussion is all about big versus small employers. So we're joined with Jenna and Craig. So guys, would you guys mind taking a moment just to introduce yourself? Tell us, a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do, what companies you work for currently or in the past. We'll start with you, Jenna, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking I'll try not to make it too long, but yeah, I've had quite a lot of experience. I've worked across the range really, so from like really small businesses where there's literally like 3 of us or 4 of us. I've worked for some of the biggest organizations in the world, like tech company HTC, and that's like obviously massive. And then I've also worked for myself on different scales. I've had my own businesses. So it's quite interesting, like seeing the different areas and how each one of those things are very different in their own ways, and also cross sort of industries as well. So I've done hospitality, retail, media, yeah, all sorts really. So it's quite interesting.
Got a nice broad spectrum of, like you said, working for hospitality, working for yourself, and larger organizations as well. So it's good that we'll have that input from yourself, where you've got that broad spectrum of being self-employed to having somebody manage you. Great, good stuff. So Craig, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, similar to Jenna, worked across a wide range of industries. I grew up in Dudley. I'm 39 years old, from working on the shop floor at McDonald's, putting fryers in, to appearing on a McDonald's commercial as a commercial actor. But now I have a couple of different businesses. Coalition Event Services, been running for 10 years this September, is an event organising company. We provide creative production event services, and we provide them on behalf, pre-pandemic and coming back now, on behalf of some of the world's leading brands like NFL, Sky, Premier League. I've worked all over the world on different events, film festivals. As a result of the pandemic, we were working with the Tutankhamun exhibition. Everything stopped in March of last year, and I launched a drive-in cinema in Stafford. My office was in East London, but I'd moved back up to the Midlands, Staffordshire, in November 2019. Good timing to be out of London just before the pandemic. I didn't see it coming. And I launched the Great British Drive-In up in Stafford. That ran for a year, and then set up the Great British Experience Company, because I won a tender with the council in Stafford to be the operator at one of their parks, well, a park in Stafford Town Centre. And we also do pop-up events, and we're an experience company, hospitality, events management. And I also run a tech startup called iZero, which is a platform for providing zero contract workers, booking, searching, and running the whole payroll process as well. And I'm also a co-founder of Funicular Productions, which is an immersive theatrical dining experience company. We have a venue off Brick Lane in East London. I co-write shows, cast them, direct them, produce them. And yeah, last year we'd opened a new bar in East London just before the pandemic. We launched it February 28th. We're open for 2 weeks. That closed. We were still paying rent till July, and then we've that new concept stopped. We've relaunched our flagship show in May. So yeah, quite a varied range, focused on events and hospitality and entertainment, really.
Brilliant. That's really, really interesting. And I suppose with like Jenna, you've got that knowledge where you've worked across so many different companies, and having to go back to working for yourself and in partnerships and stuff. That information and experience that you'll be able to provide for today's session will really, really be vital to our young people that we're trying to speak to, because you'll be able to offer perspective that not many managers and employers really get the opportunity to share with people that they're looking for. So Yeah, thanks for being here, Craig and Jenna. Wicked. So let's get started. Let's pop these questions off and see what we come up with. So question number one, guys. We want to know what is considered being a big organisation. I mean, how many employers would you expect in a big organisation? What's the turnover? Is there a specific kind of critique that makes them different to smaller organisations? What are, let's say, 3 points each. What are the main 3 things that you would say make a big organisation a big organisation? Start with you, Jenna.
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, the main sort of things, if we're talking from like a young person's perspective, it would probably be that, you know, you've got more departments, you've got more people, and with that actually comes more sort of red tape. So whereas when you work for smaller organizations, you can sort of learn a lot more because it's more intimate and you get to a wider skill set. So in terms of like bigger organizations, for me, it's always like there's more departments, there's more people, and there's more hoops to jump over sometimes because, you know, you have to ask for permission and you have to do this, whereas you can sort of be a bit more flexible and, you know, ask for permission, not forgiveness kind of thing. So yeah, and then in terms of turnover, I don't know, maybe Craig, you'll be better at answering this because from being on the whole spectrum of different, you know, being employed and being self-employed, there's been different times where those things would mean different things to me, if that makes sense. So if you said something like, you know, thousands of pounds once upon a time, that would have meant a lot. It would have been like, whoa, you earn thousands of pounds. You know, being from Handsworth as well, it's, you know, things are very different when you start from sort of places like that where money is sort of viewed differently. Then when you're talking about like millions of pounds, when, you know, for me, myself, I've kind of also been around housing. So my family business, we manufacture kitchens and bedrooms. I've also sort of been on boards where I've been part of housing cooperatives and stuff. So with those kinds of businesses, you are looking at millions of pounds. But then when you actually put that into perspective, it doesn't really mean anything. They're just figures. I mean, Craig, you'll probably back that up as well, but they're just numbers. But I think for me, it's all really about perspective, and it's, yeah, it's quite an interesting one.
So for you, Jenna, in terms of like for your family company, for example, even let's say they were making hundreds of thousands or millions, that may not have been considered a big organisation to yourself, opposed to a more commercial organisation like, you know, your Wix or your B&Q, for example. So yeah, turnover doesn't really makes a big organisation big.
Yeah, I mean, there probably are like thresholds where you consider it, you know, on paper. But I think for me, from a young person's point of view, I'd probably say, you know, depending on what your mindset is and where you're at, you know, £20 sometimes for me at one time, that would have been a lot of money because it was like £20 is like all you've got for the week. And it's like, how are you going to make that stretch? So, you know, and just finding pounds or change would have been like a lot. And then so really it's about perspective and like, you know, because when you look at, you know, the whole financial part of it, you can turn over stuff, which is just what you're turning over, but then there's your profit as well. So it's like they mean very different things. So yeah, I think for me, it's all about perspective.
Nice, thank you. Craig, what about yourself? What do you think makes a big organisation a big one?
I think you have this term of SMEs, small, medium-sized businesses. So you might have a sole trader, which is someone self-employed, which is probably them on their own. They may have a few people around them. Then you move into a small, medium-sized enterprise, which is an acronym of SME. And generally, the number of 250 employees takes you to the SME, which doesn't sound small because 250 people, if you're in a classroom of 30, that's quite a few classrooms. And then turnover-wise, they're looking, you know, 20 million. Anything above that, really, you're looking into a large organisation. But yeah, as Jenna says, I mean, that's probably another question. But turnover, whilst yes, millions of pounds, 20 million pounds, 10 million pounds is a lot. £1 million is a lot. But if you've got 10, 20 staff and you're still a small company, that turnover is only the sales. Then all your expenses that are going out, if they exceed that £1 million that you're bringing in, you're in trouble. But yeah, as a small company, really, a large company, yeah, 250 employees. I mean, I'd consider 100 employees pretty significant, but I think, yeah, the numbers that kind of get bounded around chambers of commerce and whatnot, and when you're applying for grants or whatnot as an SME, small medium-sized business, really look to the 250 number is what I always say.
I think that's really interesting. I think even just hearing some of the terms that both of you have used, for a young person, the language when we speak about, you know, organisations and companies and things like that, it's a whole new dictionary to us. It's a completely whole new range of vocabulary. So for ourselves, it's about how does that make it relevant to us when we are applying to these big organisations, which is something that we'll come to later on. But it's quite interesting to see two people from similar kind of, not necessarily I want to say backgrounds in terms of your, like where you've been employed and your journey as, you know, self-made people, I suppose, how your language differs between the both of you. So that's quite interesting. And I think it's important for us as young people to go away and do our research and the kind of vocabulary and language that's used when we speak about these organisations, because that can make the difference between us being having a greater chance of being employed and not being employed if you know how many people you're up against.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to interview at a large company and you can tell that company what their turnover was last year, which would be publicly available information, and you can say, well, I realised that you guys turned over £100 million and I'd love to be a part of that. Instantly, you'd like to think that start turning off set off alarm bells. Not alarm bell in a bad way, in a good way.
No, brilliant, perfect, thank you. All right then, guys, I think we'll move on to our next question. And that is, what can you expect when joining a large company? So we've kind of gone into that a little bit, but if you can kind of elaborate a little bit more. We'll start with you this time, Craig. What would you say we should expect when we're approaching these companies and when we're looking to join them in terms of, I suppose, the recruitment stage of it all?
I think you find them, in my opinion, of course, but I think generally speaking, you would find a more structured, formal process. I think, and it has to be that way because of the size and the scale, and from a communication perspective. So yeah, a formal process, the application process of where I can interview someone for my company as a managing director, and if I can overshadow a process, if there's 10 questions and all those questions lead to the certain point, I can bring more opinion into it, whereas a larger company would have probably more of a process drive behind it, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think for me, when I've applied to like certain to work with like different brand ambassador companies or larger like hospitality branches, like, you know, Hyatt hotels, there's multiple franchises all over. Their recruitment process is very selective. You know, you have your online application, it's then shortlisted to come into an interview. Then after your interview, you might have something completely different where you maybe have to show some skills or whatnot, and then you'll kind of set an email from that point onwards to say if you're successful or not, opposed to where I've kind of approached like social enterprises or wanted to work in partnership with people. It's been more about sharing that passion and enthusiasm, and they kind of bite onto that a little bit better because it can be a bit more personalized, whereas the don't have the capacity to do that. So
yeah, I think you're right, and I think going back to what I said earlier on of, you know, you bring up the turnover in that large organization interview, it may tick a box or make somebody think, oh, that's a really good thing. That may not tick a box on their formula of, you know, it was on a small company. That would really entice me and excite me that somebody knows that, whereas actually on a larger company, maybe that's negated because it doesn't tick a box of educational or what GCSEs or, you know, on that sense. So yeah,
Doing
that's
research is important then. You know, if you're going to go for a larger or a bigger organisation, doing your research before that interview stage can really help make the difference and make you stand out a little bit more.
I think yeah, across the board, research and knowing what the company you're going to. I think that whether large or small, I think for a larger company, just expect more process, and as well, the knowing that you're in the pool of more applicants likely. You know, going for I remember applying for in my second year at uni, applying for 50 work placements for large brands and graduate schemes, and not getting any interviews. You know, and that kind of forced me to make my own path, which has been great, but at the time it sucked.
Maybe,
yeah, thank you.
yeah, I was going to say, even maybe if you look back, I always sort of like to reverse engineer things to see like how did we get to this stage, and I think we live in a very different world to what we did, you know, maybe in the 60s and 50s. So if you
look, not that old, Jenna.
No, I wasn't saying that you know, but I just mean generally speaking, if I look at like my mom's generation or even her parents, you know, generation, they came from a world where you would kind of like find an industry and then, you know, the children would follow into that industry. So if you look at, you know, what a big organization meant then, it actually meant trust. It meant that, you know, security, like you could be in, I don't know, manufacturing and you could stay there for quite some time. Now I don't think that's quite the same, because it feels like these trusted organizations that you would have gone through. I mean, look at the manufacturing and car manufacturing, that's been awful, hasn't it, over the last sort of decade or so. You know, the NHS has been quite worrying how little funds they sort of have to play with. So really the question is, you know, in terms of larger organizations, is that job security still there like it used to be? So I think that's culturally changed a lot of the way we are and how we think. So I think they say nowadays we'll have what you call a portfolio career. So before you might have only just tried one thing. Now you'll have maybe 5, 6, 7 different, you know, careers that you'll try, which I think, you know, for my generation, I'm testament to that, saying I've worked in retail, and yourself as well, Craig, you know, retail, hospitality, media. So I think for any young people watching, I would say, as you're starting out, for me personally, I would say just go and do both. Go and try the big organizations, try the smaller ones. And the difference for me is maybe some of the benefits that you'd get. So with bigger organizations, you're going to have things like, you know, health and pension, things attached to it. Whether they'll still be there and guaranteed in, you know, 20 years time, I don't know how that will look. But I think if you reverse engineer it, that's probably what the benefits were before. And then what was your original question, Cheyenne?
So yeah, it was what can we expect when we're joining these larger companies? And I think you touched on it quite nicely there by, you know, bringing up the pensions and these benefits, company cars for a lot of places, you know.
Do you remember Cadbury's? The other thing as well is, because I mean, Craig, you've probably done this as well, part of your business plan, you'd always say, you know, look at the environmental and social economic factors that are going to impact your business at some point. So, you know, things like Brexit, how is that going to affect the industry that you're going into? Because if you're looking to, you know, choose a larger organization to work for some of those benefits, you might want to reconsider if things like Brexit and import costs might, you know, make them fold over. Things like COVID happened, and obviously anybody that worked in the arts and the hospitality industries, they really suffered, kind of thing. So for me, my advice is always go and try loads of different things and find what it is that you love. And you know, in my experience, I've enjoyed both. I think I've learned a lot from all of them. So I think even like one of my earliest retail jobs was Peacocks, and because I'm a bit of a geek, I love the fact that they had such a great handbook, and it really told you everything that you had to know about the company and what the protocols were for things. And for somebody that likes structure and order, that really was nice. And then when you go and work for smaller organizations, so one of my first jobs was working in a vegetarian and vegan restaurant. And I think it was a couple that used to run it, lovely couple. And and there was a chef and probably like 2 or 3 waitresses, very, very small team. But it was lovely because we'd all have, you know, dinner after our shifts, and we'd sit down, and it was like a family environment. So when you work for smaller sort of organizations, you get a nice feel, and you do feel like you're part of a family, which is also nice. So there's been benefits, pros and cons to them both, really. Sometimes with the bigger organizations, they're not as flexible. So I remember starting college, and then, you know, I've seen this with other people as well, where they won't give you time off, or, you know, because they don't know you in your personal situation, they tend not to be as flexible or understanding sometimes. So that's something to be considered as well.
Definitely. Perfect. Thank you. You've kind of bridged quite nicely into the third question that we had, which was what can we expect from smaller companies? And I think you quite, you know, spoke quite nicely about that, those smaller, more intricate values that we won't find in larger organizations. And that can really make the difference when you want to feel like you're a part of something. You know what I mean? Like, especially if you spend a lot of your time working at, you know, for me, I spend more time at work than I do in my own house, you know. So I work for the NHS, I work on the ambulances, and 66 hours last week I was at work, you know. I don't even see my home. And it's such a large station that I'm based at. We've got over 500 members of staff there, you know, and the only time your managers see you is if you've done something wrong, really, because they just don't have the time or the capacity to get to know you on that level. So when you do, you know, kind of need a favor or need to be excused for a shift or get things moved around, there are processes that you have to follow. Whereas if you've got that more smaller family kind of family morals and nice and intricate, and everybody knows everybody, then it's a lot more easy to approach people and say, look, I'm going through such and such. Can I swap this, or can I have a bit of time off to do this, that, and the other? And I think with the smaller organizations, because they've had to kind of work and graft so hard and rely on one another, they're a lot more understanding. Whereas the larger the organization, it becomes more about ticking boxes and following policy and procedure, because they need that order to sustain the massive work that they have to do. And that's not found in smaller organizations. It's not a bad thing. But for me, it's definitely a point that differs, that separates a smaller and a larger organization. What about you, Craig? What do you feel? What should we expect from a smaller organization then?
Everything you guys have just said, really. You know, you join it, you're probably going to be exposed to more experience, more expected of you, in the sense of, you know, you may talk to the managing director of that company on a daily basis, whereas, you know, within your job, Shan, you may never talk to the managing director of the ambulance service, or, you know, and also, you know, large companies have departments. So within a marketing department, there may be social, outdoor, TV. In a small company, you may be doing everything.
Yeah.
And exactly all that, you know, handbooks, whilst, you know, legal requirements for HR, there won't be a HR department, likely won't be a HR department within the small company. That may fall to the managing director as well, or it may fall to operations director, or be outsourced.
Which can be a problem, can't it, Craig? If you've like got a problem with your manager, like, you know, if your manager is the person that owns the business and you speak to every day, it's like, oh, who do you go to then if you're not getting on with them? So I suppose that's like a little con.
Yeah, there may be glass ceilings for growth. Larger company may have 20 different levels of layers of where you can progress to in 20 years or 10 years or 5 years. Within a small company, the only person above you may be the managing director, of which you need them to step aside before you're going to be promoted, in that sense, you know. So yeah, structure. Again, I mean, we're talking, I guess what I'm going super small in that sense, whereas a company with 100 staff, would probably be operating like a larger company. But it does all come down to the same, that order, because of so many people. Everyone has to be organised, because if they weren't, you just have chaos, wouldn't you?
I think that level of competitiveness as well, like you said, with the larger organisations, you are competing probably against 50, 60 of the members of staff for a position as well. So that can limit, the growth there. And when you're going back to your own kind of hierarchy of needs, if we don't grow or we don't achieve things, then that can knock on our self-esteem a bit and force us to kind of venture into other avenues. And I also feel that it depends on the type of organisation that it is that you're working for. If it is a holistic based company, whether it be larger or smaller, because of the core values that organisation's built off, they may be a bit more lenient in helping you kind of succeed into areas that you want to, or to progress and be more understanding and willing to offer support and guidance. Whereas if it's a public service like the NHS, for example, everybody's got suggestions of improvement. Everybody's got ways of working that they feel might be better for the one job role. And you kind of just have to say, okay, there's no right or wrong. As long as we get the job done and we don't break any laws, it is what it is, and then you kind of become a little bit institutionalized then. And I find that working with the NHS at the moment, it's kind of like, yes, sir, no, sir, get the job done, don't break any rules. And that way the managers are off your back. And you rely on each other to kind of help keep that morale going within the workplace. And that's really, really vital in a larger organisation for me. So
it's really an interesting point that you make there, because when you think then about how we become innovative, so within that structure, actually, there's a limit to how, you might see things that you're like, oh, this actually is something that I can improve on your process. But because it's so strict, and as Craig said earlier, they have to be, because you're trying to replicate systems over and over and over so that you can actually grow and stuff like that. But it's something that tech companies come across a lot. I don't know if you guys if you're geeky like me and you watch BBC's Click, but there was an episode where he's like a billionaire, I can't remember his name, but he's actually bought a plot of land in Nevada, and it's going to be free from government and everything, because he thinks that he wants to build this sort of tech village where it's just pure innovation and there won't be any interference from government, because they're their own sort of state, if you like. So it really brings an interesting question to, how innovative we get as a society that is moving very digital. And what, if we go down the innovation route, what would that look like in terms of future employment? Already we're seeing that you get less face-to-face stuff on interviews and stuff like that. So I was talking to a teacher the other day, and she was saying that she finds that the students really struggle with digital interviews, and they freeze up because they don't like being on camera in that way, which I thought was quite interesting. So I think that's another thing to be considered as well, like innovation. Where is it going to take us in this digital world?
You're doing so well at bridging me on to the next question.
Hi. Oh, thanks.
What personalities might better suit a small or a big organisation? And as you were saying, in terms of, being innovative, and especially with this generation where we are pretty tech savvy, we live on our phones, how will that kind of work when you're approaching a big organisation, and how will it work if you were approaching a smaller one? Does it cause a difference? So what would you say personality best suits a big organisation to start off with? Go back to you, Jenna, sorry. You led us onto it.
So in terms of personality, I think, first of all, I would always say to any young person watching this, try everything, see what you like and also see what you don't like, because they're just as important. But I think if you're somebody that really likes order and structure, maybe the bigger organization is right for you. If you're a bit rebellious and you really care about a particular issue, maybe go find somebody that's local and get to know them, because you will be able to put maybe your own input in there, and you'll be able to have closer relationships. If you're very much like that sort of family environment, smaller organizations are definitely better. So yeah, I think I would always say, like, try and, I say this to everybody, understand who you are first as a person, and then you can get on with other people around you. But if you don't really know who you are, it's very difficult to sort of place yourself. So the only way that you're going to find that is if you go and try them all, because enrichment is really everything.
Trial and error, isn't it? And especially for young school leavers that are 16, they ain't got a clue who they are, We think that we do, and the world around us, it shows us that we're not quite ready. So yeah.
But they also, a lot of what I see with young people, because I work a lot with young people, is there's this culture of sort of self-gratification and wanting everything really fast. And I mean, Craig, you'll probably back me up on this. It takes a very, very long time to get where you want to be. And it really is like hard work, hard work, hard work. There's times where, it's ups and downs, and it's never really a straight line. Life moves in anything, it moves in waves, and it's all intertwined. So if you're just wanting to start something and then within 6 weeks, make so much money or whatever, it's the wrong mindset to go into it with. Always, whether it's a big organization or a small one, go in there wanting to learn, because the knowledge is the power. Like, whatever you learn, what you put into something is what you're going to get out. So that is literally my strongest advice. Like, learn, and then the things will follow, whatever it is that you want, whether it's you're driven by money. I think that's another thing, what are you driven by? Are you driven by the money? Are you driven by the cause, the company, are they environmentalists and you're really into that? Because once you find what it is that your purpose, then you're going to put whatever it is into it that the company wants from you as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. You touched quite nicely on it earlier, Craig, when you used your own example and said you applied to these 50 graduate schemes and never got a response from not one of them, and now here you are, you're co-founders of multiple different companies, you're setting up shop left, right and centre for all of these, wonderful different businesses and all of these goals that you're trying to achieve and whatnot. But I suppose the lived experience that you can help share with us today is the fact that it never came overnight, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And delaying gratification is a wonderful thing, and the more people understand that, the better life will be, but yeah, it takes time, it takes hard work, and you know what, always learning, as Jenna says, be open to it, because you're continually learning. I'll never stop learning till the day I drop down, hopefully. But yeah, and you have successes, you have failures, and whether you got, and I continue to go through those, and there's a vulnerability about having your own business. But I think back to the question on this of personality for whether they go large or small company. I think like Jenna says, I think you should try everything, and I think there's a great I left school 20 odd years ago, and I think there's when you work for a big company, there's something lovely about feeling that association with a big company, and you do get different experience with a small company. So I think regardless of, I actually think we're all a little bit of everything. I think we can all be introvert at the time we need to be introvert or want to be introvert. We can all be extrovert when needed. Some people may say no, but in 10 years time they may realize they have a little extrovert in them. I think we can all be happy, all be sad, and without each of them we wouldn't have either. So I think look at the roles you're interested in, and you won't know who you are at this point in time. You may think, I want to get into marketing. Go for it. Just go for it. And if you do have a portfolio career, enjoy it. If you don't, and you are with someone for 30 years, enjoy that. But yeah, I think everyone should shoot for whatever they see in front of them. And if it's the 50 brands that excite you that you get nothing from, just bounce back and keep going, because the no's are as important as the yeses, right? Because the no's put you onto the path that you're going to go on anyway. So I think regardless of personality, I don't think there's obviously there's different personality profiles suited to whatever certain jobs, but I think the learnings you could get from process of working with a big company, if you choose then to work for a smaller company or set your own company up, would be invaluable. So I'd say regardless of personality, apply for either and both.
Definitely.
I think probably what the most important part is from that is once you've done whatever it is first, or both, then bring those skills into the next thing. So if you've worked in a big organization, why not bring those skills into the smaller organization? And then, that makes you look really good as well. And I think just touching on some of what Craig just said, it really is about purpose and, what do you want to do at the end of it? Because some people, like you said, Craig, they just want that brand recognition. I've worked for Coca-Cola, or I've worked for this company. Job titles are very important to some people. I want to be a marketing executive, or I want to be a CEO. So it's like, if you don't really know like who you are and what you're trying to do in life, then you are going to end up drifting, and then you won't really get anywhere because you won't be absorbing what you need to absorb in order to get to where you want to be. So I think knowing what you want and then trying it all to get the enrichment, and then always being humble, because I think that's another important part, like always be humble. And I remember somebody said to me once, be careful how you treat people on your way up, because you don't know whose bottom you're going to have to kiss on the way back down. And it's so important at any point, as Craig said, there's vulnerability. So, always being humble and hard working, that really gets you far.
It's sometimes, I mean, you just, I probably still don't know what I want to do or where I want to go, right? There becomes a point that you may marketing may interest you. You won't know every single role within the marketing. You may not know that you're going to be a CMO, a chief marketing officer of a technology company, because you may not know that role exists at 16, right? So I could say, you know what, jump in, apply, show interest in that role. I've been receiving CVs recently on a Kickstart scheme, the government Kickstart scheme, and we've taken on 8 people on the Kickstart scheme for one of the companies, and I've been at all those interviews because I want to engage with it. And I've had several CVs, and I read all the CVs that come through, and some of the CVs are applying for roles like a HR assistant, and they may not have any experience in HR, and that's fine because they're leaving school, and I wouldn't expect them to have any experience in it. But you can also show an interest in it. So the CV that just sends me, these are my hobbies, these are my grades, I'm applying for a HR assistant, I look at it and I say, well, I need to see some interest in human resources. Why are you interested in it? Go and do a free course online. You could do a free course through Read, Indeed, and just do a 1-week free course that's shown a little bit of interest, and make your application tailored for that role of that company, because that will stand out. But I think
yeah, definitely.
And sometimes you're getting that, you may get into marketing accidentally, but you may enjoy it, and you may snowball, and that big company could really help on your resume of, I was at Coca-Cola as a marketing exec. That instantly holds you up when you're going elsewhere because of that pedigree. And you may not have actually had the experience as somebody at Joe Blogs and Sons Limited had, but that Coca-Cola stuff, boy, does that stand out on your resume,
So for you as an employer, it's about seeing that interest come through in those CVs, seeing that interest that sparks your attention. And I think because you've worked across so many, do you think that's what's enabled you to get into some of the positions that you have? What qualities would you say you've shown that have got you into the positions that you have?
I've only ever, since an interest and a passion to do something. So I've film events, I love them, and passion. You can't you can't argue against any of that. And if somebody comes to me and says, I love what your company does and I'm willing to come and work for you and I'd love to work for you, my interview technique is I ask people what their dream job would be, and with our company, and then I have a look at it. I say, I may not be able to give you a dream job, but let's have a look at it and see how we can. And I encourage creativity across the board, and I encourage people to change, to implement process change. That's very unique, isn't it, in a company? Because but yeah, passion, interest in the role, interest in the company, research.
Perfect.
A CV that I received that is what I would call a template, a name, an email, hobbies, grades, nothing relevant to the job they've applied for, a generic CV, discarded straight away.
Yeah. Perfect. Jenna, what about yourself? When you're interviewing people, what makes people stand out for you?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. Probably a lot of what Craig said. The passion is a major thing. One thing that annoys me is if somebody comes in and I ask them, do you know what we do, and then they haven't really looked at anything. That's just a big turn off, because I'm like, well, if you can't really be bothered to even understand what we do, then I don't really know what I can do with you, because straight away you're showing me that you've got no passion or drive and you're just turning up for the sake of it. I know my journey, and I know that I want similar people like me, or people that can't do what I can do. So I'm always looking for personality when I'm looking to hire people. And yeah, I think it's very much passion. Do you care? Have you got the right heart? And I think it's probably more the passion and the drive. And yeah, I'll try and work with people. I'm always kind of thinking, there's a lot of things that people haven't really done before, so you can teach them. If we look at Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's never done that job before. So for me, I'm not so fussed about experience, because I'm like, everyone starts from somewhere and you learn on the job, but your heart really matters to me, and that's probably the most important thing.
Oh, wonderful. Guys, you've been absolutely amazing. Some really valuable points that you've made. Your lived experiences, they're definitely going to, relate and hit home to a lot of young people that get to watch this. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with both of you. Thank you ever so much.
Oh, it's been very, very quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. But we've got more workshops coming across the summer, so make sure that you guys follow at LifeProofUK on Instagram, and hashtag Find Your Future, and hashtag Summer Careers Festival 2021. Take care. Bye.